Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tyred Boys podcast. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, for our final episode of the 2024 F1 season. We've got a season recap, some F1 superlatives, quick hitters, some of your usual topics here that we've got going on. So excited to be here for this last episode of the year.
Yeah, Aaron, good to see you here in it's a getting colder December, that's for sure. I think we had a really fun, really competitive 2024 Formula One season. So yeah, I think going back and recapping it'll be really fun. I had some pretty enjoyable moments doing my notes and doing the recap looking back, so yeah, excited to get into it. I think we should start, as always, with the quick hitters, but before we go any further than that, I'm going to throw a wrench into your plan because I think I have an answer to one of the questions that we have been asking like pretty much all year, and I just want to see how it hits your brain, but we'll hit that in just a little bit. But let's get done the quick hitters.
Sounds good, but to start off, there was a tweet put out by the Expensify APXGP Twitter account, or X account, whatever you want to call it, and basically they said that, by the way, the people who are running this account, the Sonny Hayes account, the Joshua Pierce account, all of these fan accounts have absolutely nothing to do with the movie. We are not associated with them whatsoever. They've just been having their fun little like fanfic going on. So it's actual just random people. It wasn't set up by the movie as a publicity, like kind of garner some intrigue and get people on board to watch this movie. This was just a few dudes who were like, yeah, like this movie's coming out. Let's make some Twitter accounts and post and tweet and all of this stuff. And I guess just by gleaning information from the shoots and whatnot and any news about them being around the Grand Prix and everything, they put together this whole season long deal going on with the F1 movie that's coming out. So after making fun of this account and joking about it all year long, I saw that and I was like, oh, okay, so the movie might be half decent. It's still probably going to be a little cheesy, but I was like, okay, it made me feel a little bit better that it wasn't the movie people running these accounts.
Sure. Yeah, that's like a double-edged sword because at the same time, we fell for it hard. We were the mark.
I mean, but at the same time, there was no way to really tell. They're releasing stuff. It's getting retweeted by other accounts and I didn't seek out this account. It found my feed. So I don't feel too bad about thinking that it was the real. I mean, they made it look very in line with the F1 graphics and everything. I thought it was a promotional stunt, but apparently not.
Wow.
I know, that's my mind was blown. I saved that because I saw that a couple days after I sent you the tweets after last episode, and I was like, oh, I gotta hold on to this.
Dude, okay, one layer deeper, those guys are their own mark because they did such a good troll that we thought it was the promo for the film. We were to some degree in tune because of these posts.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yo, that's actually crazy, but I mean, it just increases the I guess just the little narrative, little story going on for it. So yeah, I mean, I may be even more interested now.
I'm more interested in the movie, but I also even more so now think that the people behind those accounts weird dudes. Like
Sure. Yeah, for
weird
sure.
people, like they weren't getting paid for that. They were just doing it for the kicks, for the kick
I mean,
salvers.
that's great A movie content right there. I think give him a job.
Yeah, honestly, they drummed up some intrigue. So yeah, definitely a shock there. But another announcement that came out, but Lando Norris, after his very successful F1 year, it was announced that he will be granted knighthood on New Year's Eve. So P2 in the championship, being the top Brit on the in the field. No one's been the top Brit in the field for quite some time. So I guess now that a new British driver has taken the top spot for the year above Lewis, they had to go ahead and knight him.
Do they have to unknight Lewis Hamilton? Can you only have one at a time?
No, I think they can collect them. I think they can collect them all.
Okay.
But yeah, that pretty cool thing. I just find it interesting. I don't remember how far into Lewis's run of championships he was knighted, but I vaguely remember it being like not after his first world championship that he received his knighthood. I think it was somewhere after he had a couple. So I don't know exactly what the kind of the barrier to entry is, I guess, but they like Lando enough, so he'll be Sir Lando Norris.
Well, they may factor in extracurriculars, like for like they do with scholarships or something. I mean, Lando's Twitch stream do be popping off sometimes, so maybe like that weighed in his favor.
Yeah, he's hitting a larger target demographic than Lewis was, so the additional eyes on him just moves that, expedites it along.
Yeah, and like you could even say he's like for the youth. You know what I mean? He's like
he is a youth.
exactly.
So yeah, pretty cool though. So that'll be neat for him to be joining Lewis as knighted folk over there in Great Britain. But to move along, the FIA approved a refined concept for the 2026 Formula One concept. So they released some pictures and everything. There are some decent differences between the cars and the current generations of front wing looks. And of course, these are all from the concept in line with the 2026 regulation changes and everything, so we could very easily have some different looking cars come into the grid still anyway, like we've seen with Mercedes with no side pods and things like that. But yeah, the front wing and the end plates on it look significantly different. The sides of the floor look like they are have changed a decent bit as well. So some minor things that you can see as you're looking at that. But it was pretty cool to see that drop and see some of those things with the new concept.
Yeah, and the new concepts also often look like the video game version of like the latest
Right.
F1 car, and then when it gets translated into nuts, bolts, and carbon fiber, it tends to look a little bit different. But we'll see how the teams are getting their what would you say, like downforce advantages and like grip advantages, taking into account these changes, like you're saying, to like the floor, the end plates, the front wings, these type of things. But I always do enjoy how like the first like image or two that they have at like whatever, like the expo or the unveiling, or they have like images. It's always like the dream, like almost like ideal version of the Formula One car.
Or just like super generic too, just like this is it's I don't know if I would think of it as the ideal. I think of it more as like if you color within every single line on the page, this is what you get. It's just
Oh,
like
that's
if
interesting. Okay.
you are within every regulation, then it should be approximately like this is just the base model, kind of, before you start getting the upgrade packages, when you're going to buy that Toyota Corolla. There's like the Toyota Corolla, then there's a Toyota Corolla S, the LX, the all of these different, little updated or higher power models.
Oh shit! So you're actually saying the one we see is like the level 1 version,
I think it's just like the generic, like the
right?
don't be creative, don't try and like mess with these, not the, and I'll bring it up a little bit, not the things that are forcing rule changes partway through the season. So
Of course. Okay. No,
yeah,
that actually seems like a good way to think about it.
yeah, so but still it's always cool to see and to like be able to see some noticeable differences just off the bat, with different parts of the car. So of course, that being 2 years out, we've still got a full season before those big regulation changes, but it's exciting with that, and with the other, big news of the Cadillac Formula One team joining the grid in 2026, and they officially have partnered with Ferrari to supply their engines and gearboxes, leading or for the 2026 season, as they're getting all of their manufacturing and everything up to speed for engines and everything for Formula One moving forward. So that announcement for 2026, all of the different little bits and pieces we get, it's just going to be a pretty exciting time, I think, for Formula One.
Yeah, the transition period from 25 into 26, seems like there's going to be a whole bunch of shakeups. The new chassis and vehicles notwithstanding, but a bunch of change-ups and shakeups to the grid as well. Speaking of change-ups and shakeups to the grid, next we want to talk about some of the like roster moves or personnel changes that happen throughout the year, like some of the bigger ones. But before we get there, because I think this is at the top of that conversation, is like moving forward this Red Bull V Carb Sergio Perez problem. And when I was going back and watching tape footage, you get to Monaco, lap one, turn two, the Haas cars pinch Sergio Perez, and we have one of like the worst crashes in my opinion since Romain Grosjean. Like it was really,
Yeah,
really
that
ugly.
that was, and on
And
like one of the fastest parts of that circuit right off the gate. Yeah.
in my mind, and I don't know if I'm right, but in my mind, and especially when you look at like his performance after this race, that felt like a stark change in performance for Sergio Perez. Before that race, P2s, P3s, P4s, there was like one or two races where like it was honestly bad luck. And then post Monaco, we just see it drop off and drop off and drop off. And I wonder how that hits your ear, where like this question of Sergio Perez's performance, do you think the fear maybe got into him in some way after that Monaco crash?
I don't think I had even that had crossed my mind. I felt like, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we talked about and we've heard about Max with his 51G crash or whatever it was at Silverstone in 2021, and how he said for pretty much the rest of the season he had some like visibility issues and things like that eventually worked themselves out. But you really don't know what kind of, even though he was like not physically injured body wise other than shaken up and everything from that crash, what kind of other effects and ulterior kind of effects that may have had on him for going forward in the season. Like, and it's tough to know because teams don't want to release that information and everything, but it definitely could explain things a bit more after that, because you do see a pretty significant drop off at that point.
Like, it's wild, and it's a bad crash. And I know at the end of the year he says like his driving style like was tough to reconcile with like the way that they had laid out their vehicles. But yeah, it hit me like a lit up light bulb where I was like, damn, I wonder if this like was maybe not the root cause or 98%, but I just wonder how much like he would think about that, or like does that make you like question your ability or anything like this, like does like how much would that kind of worm its way in. But yeah, just rewatching that Monaco race, like there's like the really high highs of Leclerc winning and all of this. You get the wonderful Alex Jakes cast there at the end. Like that's actually great, by the way. So there is a stark difference between the beginning of that race and the end of that race, but it kind of reframed how I thought about Sergio Perez, because like I kind of forgot that too over the course of the year, and we're just like, damn dog, what happened? And it's like, bro, like he took a header into that wall.
Yeah, that would honestly make a lot of sense, and who knows, maybe down the line, similar to the Max situation and everything from 2021, we'll hear about it way later down the road, and maybe not even until Sergio writes a book about his time in F1 or a biography drops or something like that, sure, where we get some of that info. But still, it's it's very interesting to think about in that way, because I feel like this season has been so action packed, and there's constantly been moving parts additionally to the actual driving, with driver changes and signings and everything across the year, that did kind of slip my mind a little bit, that could have been a significant factor in that moving forward, or even just like the comfort in the car and everything else. So it's
last thing I'll say on it, just like it's not going to be my headcanon moving forward. It's not going to be what I believe. It was just like a really interesting question to ask, when thinking about the season as a whole. I'm just going to take 1 second to say, give a little grace here to Sergio Perez. We may have been, maybe critical, or we're not looking at like some obvious reasonable explanations for a little bit of lack of performance. So just an interesting question I wanted to bring to you right at the top of the show, but I think it'd be a good idea to move forward, talk about some of the big like roster moves and personnel changes that we had throughout the year. What top of the list kind of comes to your mind?
Well, of course, to start the year off, we kicked off the silly season with Lewis announcing that he'd be leaving for Ferrari before the season had started and everything. So immediately kind of throwing a lot of things up in the air. No one anticipated a Mercedes seat being open. Carlos Sainz didn't anticipate going anywhere, I don't think, based on his performance and how well he had been driving. So kicks things off with a bang, and then of course we had the other big news that happened relatively early in the season, that Kick Sauber was going to become Audi in 2026, and so with that, changes in personnel, like bringing on Matteo Binotto to head that project for Audi. But initially, one of those big things was getting a multi-year signing of Nico Hülkenberg, who I honestly think that that might have been the second best roster move of the season, just behind Ferrari snagging Lewis, because based on the performance that Sauber had throughout the year with Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, next year is going to be a pretty rough year. And looking at Nico Hulkenberg, he was like a shining star. One of the things that I kept seeing as I was going back through my notes and everything was just Hulkenberg popping up again and again, and another good quality and a solid race and picking up points and all of these things across the year. And for Sauber to be able to get him, bring him in, and especially for the multi-year deal going into Audi, I think that might be one of the bigger signings that a team was able to get, because it was before we saw how consistently good Hulkenberg was going to be throughout the full course of the year.
The only question I have is how patient is Hulkenberg? Can he like work through the tough weekends, understand that there's like performance to be had, maybe not this, this season, but like as this project is moving forward, will like is he there for project building, or like what are his kind of short to medium term goals? Because it can't be win a race.
Yeah, but I at the same time, he was with Haas for a number of years, so sure. I feel like he's definitely a good guy to go through the really tough times. He stuck it out there with Haas. I think he loves to drive, and he is really, I think, probably hoping that Audi project gives him the opportunity to compete towards the top with a team that is really wanting to get into F1 and wanting to put that money and that effort in to produce a good team and good car. So I think I would imagine he's looking at it like, I'm locking in this potential thing for the future, and I've dealt with worse. So he's probably not going to have the best year next year. But that being said, I think he's probably looking forward to the prospects of 2026.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's like, if you're a Hulkenberg fan, that's what you're hoping for. And to your point, it does sound like a pretty solid marriage. He has dealt with worse. I guess that's like one of the few questions that I have with that, with that movement. I would see that as like a purely lateral move, or maybe like a lateral +1 for him. So yeah, I think it's something definitely to look forward to, because you're right. I think Hulkenberg was continually like ahead of where I would have expected him, like on many given weekends. So yeah, I think that's a really, really great shout.
Yeah, and so one of the bigger signings in my opinion, but then replacing him over at Haas, we had Esteban Ocon signed over from Alpine for the coming year, and then shortly thereafter, Oliver Behrman announced to be driving in that Haas after a really solid performance jumping in for Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, kind of showing he has the chops to be up there. And so that, I think, is a pretty exciting lineup to look at for Haas as well. I think that there is a little bit bigger of an upside to that lineup than maybe they had with the Hulkenberg-Magnussen pairing, more on Magnussen's side, but also with the upswing of the Haas team throughout the year. And we had some mid-season changes. We had Logan Sargent out for Franco Colapinto, Daniel Ricciardo out for Liam Lawson, to give those younger drivers opportunities to kind of prove themselves in the seat. Antonelli officially announced for Mercedes, Carlos Sainz signing with Williams, Jack Doohan coming into the Alpine to replace Esteban Ocon, and then Gabriel Bortoleto coming into Sauber to replace Zhou / Valtteri there. So those kind of all the big switches and new incoming folks into the next year. Of course, with the V Carb and Red Bull seats still kind of up in the air with things. It sounds like they are planning to make an announcement before the new year, is what I had seen. So within the next couple weeks. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so news coming up soon. Word from Christian Horner, recent sources saying that, yeah, maybe their timing wasn't the best on the re-signing, and that, yeah, it's kind of up to conversations, and those contracts sounds like don't really matter at this point.
Yeah,
Some money's going to be tossed around to get people out of them.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the money fixes everything kind of solution, but the kind of weirdness. So it sounds from what I was reading like there is some just not seeing eye to eye between Helmut Marko and Christian Horner. Helmut Marko is pushing for Yuki to be in that seat, from what I could gather, and that he feels like Yuki would be the best option currently. Yuki had the test in the Red Bull and seemed pretty comfortable in the car. He was talking about it afterwards, that it fits his driving style. He was really happy with the team. He got a lot of good time and laps in the car and everything. And then Christian Horner on the other side kind of wanting to put Liam Lawson in that seat instead. So there's kind of still a little bit of a power struggle in that decision making, and who's going to come in for that Red Bull seat if not Checo.
All we need is Red Bull to buy just one more sister team. They could like pick up Alpine, or maybe like throw some funding under like a Kick Sauber, make it Kick Bull, and then now they have 6 seats and nobody has to go anywhere. I mean,
and then we're just like, what are they doing with the 5th and 6th seats? Instead of what are we doing with the 3rd and 4th seat, we're just in the same position with just even more chefs in the kitchen.
But more Red Bull jerseys, and isn't that what we all want, really?
But are they really Red Bull jerseys? Yeah.
Who's the informer now, dude? I don't know. It's all gone way kooky.
Yeah, so...
Right, here, last thing about the V-Carb seat, and I'm getting us right back on track. Don't even worry.
It sounds
The one thing that frustrated me over the year, speaking of that V-Carb seat, some of the names that were up for it, Daniel Ricciardo, we talked about it here on the pod. Unfortunate, the way, like, especially you look at Lewis Hamilton at the end of the year, big send-off. He has his own little placard. You would have loved to see something like that for a Daniel Ricciardo. But just like we talked about, it's so weird. Like, 24 rounds, so many things happen over the course of the year. It just, like... there's just not enough time for it. Pieces have to be moved. So Daniel Ricciardo, unfortunately, 8-time race winner, gets kind of shuffled out of Formula One in a way that, for fans that I know of him, that like felt really bad.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the tougher kind of pills to swallow across the season, that he just went off into the night without he just kind of Irish goodbyed out of Formula One, not on his own free will, of course, but especially leading into Las Vegas, which is like any U.S. Grand Prix, I feel like Daniel Ricciardo is just celebrated all weekend long, and then after Singapore, they were just like, oh yeah, and Liam Lawson's gonna be driving for us now. Everyone's like, where'd Daniel go? And they're like, who's Daniel? So yeah, very poorly managed in my opinion from the V-Carb spot. I understand the want to get Liam Lawson the opportunity to drive and everything, and there were probably contractual obligations and whatnot. It sounded like for Liam to get that opportunity, but yeah, one of the more unfortunate things across the year with the driver lineups, for sure. Oh, and
Would
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I agree. Your point's better.
Oh, yeah, I just also remembered the other mega signing of the year, but Adrian Newey to Aston Martin. I forgot to write it down, so that was definitely an exciting kind of. We had our little who done it for a while, being like, what's gonna happen? Oh, was it him? Was it with the candlestick in the library? Where's Adrian Newey going? But yeah, a lot of craziness across the year with the amount of seats and contracts that were ending this year. But we'll go ahead and start moving along into more of a year recap and kind of what we're seeing across the year. Or if you want, we can get into the superlatives next. I'm not sure which one you would want to lead with.
I feel like let's start on the superlatives because I imagine we may hit like a bunch of points and then we can go back and maybe take like a larger look. Unless you wanted to go like race by race in any way, I think it'd be fun to do the superlatives.
Yeah, I think we can lead off there with the superlatives and then just hit anything that we missed as we're going through. But yeah, before we do that, here, if you're watching, if you're listening, go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe, so that you are already set for the 2025 F1 season. You'll turn the notifications on, do all of those things so that you know when we're back, but you'll also know when we're back after every race weekend of the 2025 season. So go ahead and do those things if you haven't. And we appreciate you.
Tyred Boys Podcast into Infinity 2025. We're coming at you. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being here. 2024 was great. On with the show.
Absolutely. So some F1 superlatives. You and I came up with some different ones we wanted to hit across the looking at the whole season across all the drivers. So we have Rookie of the Year, biggest glow up. So kind of a most improved, best dressed, favorite off-track story, favorite race of the season, and then best team trajectory across the year. So we will go ahead and lead off with Rookie of the Year.
The Rookie of the Year, I think, which maybe we got 2024 and 2025 a little bit confused because when I went back and looked, I was like, oh shit, we only have like 3 rookies to deal with. There'll be way more into next year that we'll have to look at. But we had Oliver Behrman, Franco Colapinto, and Jack Doohan as our like 3 like reasonable rookies to talk about. For my side, I picked Franco Colapinto just for the value of he had 8 races in Formula One, having to work like the same schedule as all the other Formula One drivers. So in some like he wasn't like removed from time where he just gets to like slot in on a weekend. Like he's fresh. It's like the actor or the character in a movie that like, why are you so clean? Like you should be dirty. You know what I mean? So I think Franco Colapinto had the opportunity like to get dirty a little bit. He had some ups, he had some downs, had some offs, had some, really solid laps as well. So I think as far as like Rookie of the Year, maybe it wasn't like top performing best results, but I think I would argue this was a type of year for an individual where you would say like, oh, he got to cut his teeth here. He got like a trial by fire type scenario. So he may not have a seat moving forward, but I really do believe Colapinto showed like a lot of gut, a lot of persistence because he had to run the same schedule as everybody else, and I commend that. I think that's great.
Yeah, and that's definitely a solid point. He, of course, also had the most, like you said, the most races across the year. With that said, I actually did go with Oliver Behrman.
Hmm.
It was not a clear cut decision. All of the things you talked about really. And I hadn't even thought about the side of just like being in the F1 schedule and everything. But Oliver Behrman, I felt like he just was able to come in and perform consistently. We saw that with Colapinto at the beginning of the year, but really across all three races that Behrman drove, I felt like he kept the errors and the mistakes to a minimum a bit more than Colapinto did, especially as the season kind of got to the later stages. Colapinto came in looking really good at the start, but started having more incidents, more crashes, and everything as the year went on. And I think that also may, and it's hard to entirely tell, but may also speak to just the quality of car that Oliver Behrman was jumping into. We saw him jump into the Ferrari early in the season when Carlos Sainz was out with appendicitis, getting his appendix removed. He comes in, drives a really solid race there, and is just able to have a nice drive. But every drive he came in, he performed well. He picked up points in the Haas in his second race, was P12 in his third race in the Haas. Then again, the Haas and the Ferrari both were above Williams in the constructors standings. So maybe Colapinto just was working with a bit tougher of a piece of machinery as well.
And these were just rookies that had just a couple of opportunities within the season. We didn't have any full season rookies this year. It
Right.
was like a couple here and there, and then some like slot ins late and these kind of things. So just a little bit of sprinkling of some Formula One rookies getting their feet wet. But yeah, I think you make some solid points for Behrman. I do agree. He was much cleaner with like on fewer opportunities, so that's like a really good look. I do like that. Stepping in for two teams means his reliability is probably rated pretty highly. If there's like a couple of teams that are like, yeah, we want him, I think that's like a big key point. So yeah, I definitely see the Behrman vote in that regard. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Just a couple other notes because I thought this was interesting looking back, just to kind of tag on to rookie performances over the year. Just want to name some notable free practice drivers that we saw come in. Andre Kimi Antonelli for that Mercedes seat. We saw a Uwasa come in for the V carb seat. We had Isaac Hadjar, part of the Red Bull program down in Formula 2, does a couple of stints. So I thought it was interesting seeing a few of these younger individuals step up into the seats, and obviously the teams have like rated time that they have to do that, but these are just some of the individuals that had the opportunity to, and we may likely see in the future. Iwasa probably not, pretty sure he's an IndyCar driver, but like Hadjar, for
Yeah,
example.
absolutely. And I think it's I mean yeah, it's a required thing, but I think it is a great opportunity for both sides. You get the drivers getting the opportunity to prove themselves a little bit, or at least like get a feel for things in the hopes that either a reserve seat or full drive are going to be available to them in the future. And so it is cool to see those guys out on the track. I know here and there some of the drivers didn't get full amounts of time due to crashes and things like that. I think in Hadjar's first time out in practice session, he didn't get much running time, unfortunately, whether that was a car issue or something like that. But yeah, I think that's just needless to say. But 2025, be here for our recap for Rookie of the Year. I think we'll have a lot more to dig into for next year's season. But to move us along into the biggest glow up, most improved, I actually I had Lando Norris for this across the year. I felt like from his previous seasons to this year, finally having a car that could be competitive at the front and everything, he grew a ton. He still has room to grow, of course, but from the beginning of the year, never having been in a race win contending car really, except on some one off occasions, all the way to putting up a really, really good fight for the Drivers' Championship and winning a Constructors' Championship. I think that shows really a ton of growth and improvement across the year. It's his first time in that title fight, and he still hung with Max and was keeping that tight for quite a while. And so just across the year, I like I said, I think Lando has room to grow. I think he's shown that with the right machinery, he can definitely compete up at the top. But I think he really, in my opinion, was the most improved driver across the year.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid vote. I would agree. I would agree on a lot of that. Kind of going from a just like really consistent points earning driver to like to multiple race winner in like one season. That's a pretty stark difference. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. The driver that I voted most improved, I think may surprise you. I thought Pierre Gasly showed a great trajectory over the course of the season. With Alpine, kind of a nowhere team in a lot of regards, especially early in the season, not having results like that you would want to write home about, and also having a couple of retirements as well. So maybe the year not starting off that great for Pierre, but he has a couple of points finishes kind of in the middle stint of the season, couple of lumps, but finishes really strong and kind of develops this average of being like average of around like P11, P12, and I think that's really solid. For a driver who does not have the best car, who is continually squabbling with his teammate. You can tell there's like some type of discord in the garage, whether it be like from the pit wall to the drivers, driver to driver. We don't really know what's going on, but I think Monaco this year was like a really, really like eye-opening moment where we see these two drivers go head to head and we're like, whoa, like why are you guys like running into each other like this? So you could see the relationship between Ocon and Gasly like clearly was not great, and Gasly, to my mind, was able to keep his head down and really improve his positions and finish really strong. So for that reason, it may not have been the most like glorious rise. I think it was really steady, and he had some grit about it on a team that seemed nowhere. Greatest success achieving a podium this year. So I think that's like really solid for him.
Yeah, and especially if you're like just looking isolating like from the start of this year to the end of this year, 100%. I mean, the Alpine car was like coming in way overweight. They were skimming down paint off the car to try and lighten it because they just could not bring something competitive, and to go from there, driving a trash can around the circuit at the start of the year to really being able to perform. He definitely across the year had a significant improvement along with that as the car improved, and really showing that he could put some good drives in there with it.
For sure. The next category, best dressed. I went for a moment for my vote as opposed to like in
Hmm.
general, because I gotta be honest, nothing caught my eye as far as like kind of what you're wearing. Nothing caught my eye more than Ferrari's livery in Miami. The
Hmm.
like going the basically like away jersey, like the baby blue with like the wheel cover colorings. That was so flashy. And I mean, you know me, I'm the guy that's like, if it's all black for performance, go for it. I don't care. Like, that's literally my opinion. So, normally, I don't really like notice stuff like that. But, like, going back and seeing them, like, on track, like,
Yeah.
racing, I was like, damn, that is fly. Like, I love that. So, that was like a livery that really stood out in my head. And to my mind, yeah, Ferrari definitely won that Miami, like, style contest that everybody tries to do. Theirs was sick. So as far as like best dressed, that's like a moment in my mind.
I just don't understand why teams don't go for things like that are a little more outside the box. I feel like anytime that other teams do these, minus like McLaren when they've done the retro like baby blue and everything with the Gulf, I think partnership that they have. But the I feel like everything's so similar, just with like some airbrushed stuff differently on the side of the car. I like seeing the cars look significantly different, like the white Red Bull, like
At
the
Suzuka,
cherry blossom. Yeah, that is sick.
yeah.
I want. That's what I want when teams go with like alternate liveries.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want just like, oh well, they just moved the bulls a little bit on the side of the car. But yeah, for my best dress, I did go with drivers, and so I had to, of course, go with the straightforward answer of Lewis Hamilton, always coming in looking fly. All the different outfits he wears across the season, including the last race of the season, coming in full red as he's getting ready to go to Ferrari for next year. But with that being said, I did have to give a very close runner up to Zhou Guanyu. Zhou, I think like every sponsor he has from China must be a clothing brand because he comes fitted out, like looking good. Just very similar to Lewis in terms of that kind of runway aesthetic that he has of you're just at a fashion show as you're coming in. You get to see that a little bit sometimes in other sports, but I don't think anyone quite does it like Joe or Lewis does. And so it's always fun to see those two as they're coming in for a race weekend.
Yeah, and you know who the real fans are, that like if you know how drivers are like coming dressed to a weekend, you're tuning in on Thursday. You don't see that shit on like Fridays and Saturdays. Everybody's in
Oh
their
yeah.
race garb. Like you only see those outfits like when they're rocking up to the track on Thursdays. So like if you know what Lewis Hamilton is wearing on any given weekend, you are like one of the VIPs. And Lewis has like the type of clothing and like would wear some outfits that I didn't even like, I don't even understand them to be clothing,
Oh
which
yeah.
means like, oh, he must be at the forefront of fashion because like I don't even understand this. So like more power to him, you know?
I'm just like give me my jeans, my my sneakers, my hoodies. I'm a happy camper.
Dude,
Um,
as long as I have
I
my fanny pack, I'm set.
I could not pull off the outfits that Lewis wears. The massively baggy legs on some of the pants, the different accessories, the watches. I can't even. There's no way. If you threw that all on me, it would look like when George Russell and Lewis swapped outfits at one of the races during the
Mhm.
season for like a little like side bit for that the social media people. Like,
Hmm.
I would look horrible in what Lewis comes looking amazing in. So yeah, shout out to him. Looking forward to it. Sad that we will probably see less of Joe's outfits, but even in that reserve driver spot, maybe we'll get to see some of those in the post race like media and whatnot that some of the drivers get to be involved in or kind of talk with the commentators and everything throughout the year. So there's still hope.
Still hope in that regard. Aaron, I'm curious, what is your favorite off-track story from the year?
It was just a bit silly, but it was when there were the reports about Max being given a bedtime because he had stayed up all night sim racing and was doing the 24 hours of the Nürburgring sim event and everything on the same weekend as having a race and offer F1. Which is his team did win that event there, the 24 hours of Nurburgring, and then he went on to win Imola as well right then after. So I just found that to be such a just like silly headline to see across the year that I'm like, they're like, oh, Max needs a bedtime, and he's like driving 24-hour races and then still winning F1 races, and I'm like, I don't know if he needs a bedtime, guys. But yeah, just kind of a lighter off-track story from the year.
Oh, to be young again and have that much, yeah, just gusto for something. Like, this kid just loves to race. Like, that's crazy.
Oh yeah, I don't have too many things that I think I could just stay up all night like jamming like that, like he does with sim racing.
Wild. And yeah, more power to him. I'm just happy to be here to bear witness to something like this because you're right. That is a wild thing to have to say to your driver, but then to for him to be locking up the dubs as well. That's pretty impressive. My favorite off-track story for the year, kind of touches back onto something we were talking about earlier, is the bid for refusal of and then eventual allowance of a new Formula One team onto the grid. I actually found that to be like very fascinating. There's a lot of like really interesting questions that you get to ask, like, is this good for like competition? What's the value of like two more drivers on the grid? The question of like, well, what about like the purse at the end of the year? They just get to, because don't like teams pay into this, and like how does this all work? And I know we've had more teams than 10 on the grid before, but I think like if it's a system you moved away from before, like why go back into it? The like large US name in Cadillac, General Motors, like that's really exciting. So I think there was a lot of interest there for me on the kind of like back end of Formula One, obviously like removed all from the competition and just kind of in the boardrooms. But it's interesting to see that stuff happen where you may get the vote from the FIA, but the teams push back and say like, yeah, but like, will their car even be good? And then Cadillac has to be like, well, here's our research that shows blah 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 will be X competitive, and then Mercedes has to be like, well, that's interesting, but what about a wind tunnel? Like just all this like back and forth that's going to go on. I found it to be really exciting, and it asks like really big questions of a sport and the fans. So yeah, just like big changes coming in, and that was kind of going on in the background. A obvious question, I don't know how many people were like asking this, but you're just like wondering where's personnel going to come from, who's going where. There's conversations surrounding that. So yeah, just a lot of moving pieces with a story like that. So moving into 2026, that Cadillac GM entry that's been kind of brewing here for a little bit. It got hit back and forth on the tennis court a little bit. They were volleying, and I thought all that was like pretty fascinating to follow. So that was mine.
Yeah, and looking at it too, we saw multiple bids in one season in a quick succession. We saw the Andretti bid, which was denied, and then we see Andretti kind of being a component of this larger Cadillac GM deal, with that being a wing of their organization for that 2026 bid and season and everything. Mario Andretti being on the board, and all for the Cadillac F1 structure and team and everything. So it's almost like you said, there's all this back and forth, and they're like, sorry, Andretti, you're not big enough. You're not going to bring what we want. And GM Cadillac, he's like, well, what about these guys? And they're just, come on in. So it makes sense, especially after learning more of this behind the scenes, that they're like, we're not really interested in just like Andretti Racing, Meyer-Shank Racing, like IndyCar has with a lot of these smaller teams and team structures and everything. They're like, we want big names, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Audi. They want these big companies with the backing, the support systems, and everything. And they were like, "Hey, Andretti, like you don't have all of that." And with GM and Cadillac coming in as a component of that, they're like, "Okay, now you do. Like this is what we were looking for." So it is definitely an interesting story that you and I have not really seen. We've seen teams get bought out, change names, things like that, but not something on the scale of change for Formula One.
Yeah, and that was part of why it was so interesting, because for our time it was it's pretty novel. So yeah, that's a really good point. And then on to an interesting question, Aaron. What was your favorite race of the season?
I feel like you and most of the listeners could have guessed it, but it was Brazil. I think after the long stretch of not winning for Max and everything, to come back and win a race like that, P17 to P1, that's a like all time kind of race for really any driver, let alone the guy who is my favorite. But alongside with that, not just the Max coming through the field and everything, but the craziness that allowed Alpine to get the double podium there as well with Ocon and Gasly. I mean, without that race and the points that they bagged there, at the end of the season in the constructors standings, Alpine's not finishing in 6th. They're finishing in 8th. That's a massive, massive difference for them across the year with that final constructors standings. They hang on to the same position that they had in the 2023 year after, like we had said, having such a difficult start to the year, being so behind on the updates, on the progress of the car and everything, teammate discord and all these different things behind the scenes. And so just from that side as well, just one of the biggest races of the year for one of those back marker midfield kind of teams there for Alpine.
Okay, all right, that's pretty fair. So like a stunning performance from a driver to watch, and then like on the other side, a lower on the team or lower on the grid team gets like a really insane opportunity for points, and seeing all that come together makes Brazil kind of memorable for you.
Definitely, yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay. I like that a lot. I was definitely of two minds as Lando's number one fan. I really wanted to pick Miami for like his maiden victory, but it is like under safety car or not under safety car, but like he just gets a really solid pit window, is able to carry it through. It's a bit of a layup win, a easier to capitalize race than he's had previously. So in that regard, it's not like a good race, but it is like memorable for his maiden victory. I had to drop that as my honorable mention. I don't think that's worthwhile enough. I think Canada was objectively, there's only one right answer. Canada was the best race of the season. The weather, the margins, the amount of drivers that were in the running to win that race was crazy. Russell, Hamilton, Norris, and Max all were like in a position to take that W. And there was like room for, I think, even the Ferraris to like mix it up a little bit as well. There were so many moments in that race that was decided by like the tightest of margins where like if this moment goes this way, they have the advantage. Like if this pit window goes the other way, like Max has the advantage. So I think that was one of like just the most exciting races. And if you want to talk about like fractions of seconds or like seconds mattering how tight things are, Canada is the only race that you can go look at because drivers were like really slicing edges, and I think it was really exciting to watch, especially from like if you zoom out from like being a fan of any one particular story or narrative. I think Canada had it all. Like I said, there were 4 or 5 drivers that were all in the running to win that race, and early enough in the year that it would have been pivotal for the whole rest of their season as well. So we see just a really, really exciting Canadian race. That's why I had to pick it as my favorite.
Yeah, and even like you said with the margins and how tight it was, coming down to even Max and George having the exact same time down to thousandths of a second in qualifying, where George sets the time first. They're both a 1:12.000 with Lando and Oscar both being within Oscar just a hair over a tenth of a second behind in P4. You very, very rarely have the top four within a tenth of a second, and so just incredibly fine margins in through the whole race weekend from qualifying as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So like not even just on Sunday, but you're right. The qualifying was like tight as it ever gets. So yeah, just big shout out to the Jacques Villeneuve circuit. That was a really like genuinely really fun race to watch. We have one more superlative to talk about here. Best trajectory, best improvement. Let's talk about the team award. Aaron, what do you got?
So I'll lead in with my honorable mention is Alpine. We've talked about it and kind of hit on all those points, but just the big improvement across the season. The reason that I couldn't give them my best trajectory was because there is that outlier of the race with Brazil. Without that, it kind of their slope was definitely on an upswing across the year, but that's a little like spike, and then it kind of comes back to normal. But for me, the Haas team was the best trajectory on the year. They were in P10 at the end of the 2023 season in the constructors standings. They come in kind of not sure what to expect from them. They make it all the way up to P7 and just miss out on that P6 in the constructors standings because of that outlier race that Alpine has. Only 7 points back at the end of the season here. So easily could have been up in P6 all the way from P10 last year. They continued to bring upgrades that just seemed to work for the car. They didn't really seem, when they brought the upgrades, they just kind of marginally kind of kept up or improved a little bit. And that with Hulkenberg's performance in particular, with the qualifying performances across the year, and then putting in solid drives. That's all goes into me choosing Haas as my best trajectory from the season.
Yeah, I think Haas is like the objective right answer. There's a lot of good points there comparing their finish in 2023 to where they end up in 2024. I think is like just data enough. That's kind of the data-driven answer. I'll give you the feel-good answer of the year is Kick Sauber getting points at the end of the year, and you just get the relief from Zhou Guanyu that's like, I knew I could do it. I got some points. That's like not the worst way to end a season. So coming in right at the end, of course, but they wrapped it up. They did it. Big high five in that regard. You know, we would have gone into the holiday break just a little sadder, maybe a little dimmer. Maybe the mistletoe doesn't hang so high if Zhou Guanyu didn't get points. But hey, we will have excitement this holiday season because Kick Sauber was able to slurp up some points. So just based on that little piece of data, we have to give it to Kick Sauber as the best improved.
Justin, there's like a little twinkle in your eye that I hadn't seen until we got to Qatar, and it's been there ever since. I think it's definitely an upswing of trajectory there at the end. That is a pretty feel good answer, and happy for them going into the off season to pick up those points.
Damn, that's a hilarious way to put that.
I mean, genuinely, like I'm happy that they did get some points. I would feel, and I would imagine the team and the engineers and all would have felt even more dejected than they probably felt across the year had that not happened. So definitely a good way to kind of wrap out the year for them after a pretty tough one. So hopefully they can get some points a little earlier next season.
Exactly.
We'll have to wait to see, of course.
But yeah, those were just like a bunch of the highlights, kind of cherry picking some moments, some fun things over the course of the year. You wanna just like rewind it a little bit. I know you had some highlighted things here that you want to go through. So let's get into some of the fixins, if you will.
Yeah, so just kind of some of those other final like talking points across the year, but just looking back through, I was trying to put notes of just kind of to regather in this longest season in Formula One history all that happened across the year. Like you had said, talking about Lando's victory in Miami, even though that was helped by just fortune with the safety car, we saw at other points across the year that other people got the benefit of those same things. Things even out. But for first career win, extremely big for Lando. And one of the other things with him that I would be remiss not to mention, kind of like I had talked about with his glow up, but he ends up being the second most winning driver of the year. He picks up 4 wins across the year. The next closest had 3 behind him. He did have lots of opportunities to do better than he ended up doing, but then again, he is growing into that position. So the 4 wins across the year, especially when it's his first year getting a win, I just thought was pretty awesome for Lando, and I'm definitely looking forward to the upcoming seasons, and hopefully, I don't think we can quite. This season's going to be tough to beat in terms of competitiveness, and kind of unexpectedly from what we're preparing for at the start of the year.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty fair assessment. Yeah, we were seeing in the beginning, we were seeing, or it was projected, it was prophesized that we were going to have like a much different season. It was kind of quickly looking like, oh no, is this just like another Max year, right? And like, yeah, if you're a Max fan, cool, but for the like health of the sport and general like enjoyment of each race, like you don't want the same guy winning all the time. So yeah, it is fun to get that injection of surprise and like genuine competition from a bunch of different teams and drivers, Lando being one of them.
Yeah, and some of that injection as well. One of the other big points, it was funny because I was looking back at notes again, but looking at when Leclerc wins in Monaco, and all of the talk surrounding that is like, oh, well, the Ferraris just not quite got it. This was their chance. Maybe we can bring a great package to Monza, and Ferrari can get their couple of wins for Leclerc in the home races. And then at the end of the season, we're coming down to the last race in a constructors fight with Ferrari and McLaren, where Ferrari has a shot to win the title after we were like, well, maybe they'll get a couple of wins here. Oh, gotta just do the ones for the fans so that Ferrari fans aren't too dejected. And then they're just on the edge of their seat to the end. It's so funny how over the course of especially such a long season, like there can be such massive swings. Like you said with Red Bull at the start of the year, we're like, we're in for it again. Max is out here winning 4 of the first 5 races, and the one he didn't win, he DNF'd because of the car. Like, I guess it's just another one of those years. But really turned into be a phenomenal one. But Leclerc's win in Monaco, his win in Monza, the crazy scenes for both, in particular Monza, just really cool moments in such a fun year.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Being able to win like 2 of your like quote unquote home races, like one for where you were born and one like that's the home of your constructor. That's like really exciting and just like tough to do in general. So to get that kind of like, it's more of like an achievement style moment, right? Like nobody really cares about that, but like to look at it and say like, oh, we did that, like that's kind of sick. So yeah, great moment for both like Leclerc and Ferrari in those regards. But yeah, also Ferrari victims of like the opposite side of that type of elation where they're like double DNFing in Canada as well. So teams struggling, teams rising as well. But to your point about making a run at the Constructors' Championship, they were forever in. They were like the merchants of like P2, P3 on the podium, but like not winning. So they were just hoovering up all these points, just race in and race out. Like they were Red Bull's like main competitor throughout like a lot of the season, you would say, because like they were up there. They amount of like dropped races that they had was very, very few. They were super consistent, kind of right out of the gate. So yeah, they weren't like getting these dubs, but the amount of points that they were getting betrayed the narrative around the team. Or the
Yeah.
narrative around the team betrayed how many points they were getting. The opposite.
Yeah, and I think it's just part of that being that it was like Red Bull is crushing everyone, but Ferrari
Right.
comes in P2 30 seconds behind or whatever. But then it's like, okay, yeah, Ferrari's there. And then all of a sudden it's like McLaren is crushing everyone and Ferrari's in P2 just right behind. So they were like at those different points, they just like were not in a position to actually win those races without something happening. But they were, like you said, always there to scoop up a big points haul, minus a couple of rougher races across the year. But yeah, it's just funny how it swung from being like they're like they stayed second best all year, but the top ones just kind of flipped around them in those best car or most competitive from race to race.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty solid way of looking at it. Just to zoom in a little bit, Sainz was on fire.
Oh yeah,
He had an incredible season for Ferrari. I think this is the most I've looked at Carlos Sainz ever, like since coming into the sport, where like really noticing his overtakes, like feeling and hearing the fire in the belly that he has. I thought he was like, to my mind, for a drive. Yeah, I think he was just like really solid and was like a super boon for Ferrari. And I use that point to kind of piggyback the Ferrari super strong consistently.
yeah, and talking about Sainz, 9 podiums across the year. He didn't finish lower than. Let's see here. I think it was he didn't finish lower than seventh, other than his DNFs across the year, and he was only seventh once. He was always in that top echelon, and pulling in some huge points week in and week out for Ferrari. And so without Carlos, it could have been a very different year for them. Of course, having Lewis come in, and I think Carlos put it pretty well when he's been asked about it. But he's kind of like, I don't think anyone. I don't think I would have been okay with anyone coming into that seat other than Lewis, because that's the only person that logically I feel like a team looking at my performance could be like, okay, this is the guy that that we can replace you with and potentially upgrade, or at least in the potentially available options. So,
Right. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. So, of course, I'm sure he's still bummed about leaving Ferrari, but he's like, if someone had to do it, at least it was Lewis. But just the other like big thing that I wanted to mention from the year was Oscar Piastri, another first time winner in Formula One, getting 2 wins on the season. Really great drives from him, very consistent throughout. He had his quiet weekends here and there, but again, his second year in Formula One, and he was winning races. He was having some really solid, really competitive drives, driving super cleanly. He was rarely getting into issues. We saw the clashes and flashpoints between Max and Lando across the year, and really Oscar did a very nice job of staying clean, maximizing his opportunities as much as he could, and he has that little bit to grow as well with just making sure he's putting it together in the qualifying every week and then being able to translate that to the race. But really an impressive sophomore year for Oscar Piastri.
Definitely agree. Couple of things I would like to tag on to that conversation here. So there was a big old microscope put onto Max and Lando in their coming together in Austria. It took 11 races before those two made contact with each other.
Mm,
By the way, just to say, like, people get so angry
it
and they're
got
so
so
quick,
blown out of proportion looking
so
back.
right, so quick to be like, Max, you're so blah blah blah. You do and it's like, okay, well, there were a whole bunch of races before this that they didn't come together, right? So I just say it to say the level of aggression that fans seem to believe Max has, it becomes tempered when you're like out of every like individual weekend. So that
Yeah.
was something that became like blatantly obvious, was like, oh, they didn't come together nearly as much as like I thought they did
Oh
based
yeah.
on, right? So there's that angle. More than those two, I saw Oscar Piastri get into more scuffles on track than anybody else, and no steward is ever looking in his direction. He's
Yeah.
literally like plowing George Russell off the road, and you look around, all of the stewards are just like turned around facing the other way. Nobody sees it at all. This
Maybe that's
guy,
why I thought of him as being so clean. No.
he never got called on it. That's the thing. There were so many like elbows out moments, specifically with George Russell, because George and Lewis and like Leclerc usually were his, like, those were his races a lot of the times. That's like who was around him. There's so many moments where like you just catch him like coming back onto the track, like he's like racing somebody else, and oh, there's Carlos Sainz coming back onto the track, but oh no, nobody gives Piastri, the hook into him. So just keep an eye out. He might be the cleanest elbows out driver that we've had, because there were a bunch of moments where he definitely fought for space. So I just want to just make that little comment. And
Definitely.
then the race that he wins is the one that's marred with the
The
Lando
swap.
do the right thing, like 10 laps of like begging your number one driver to like gift this win. I would just want to leave that weekend with my head down and be like, look, I'm gonna go get another win elsewhere, and can we just call, you know what I mean? Like, I just
Yeah.
want to forget about this one. And then the cherry on top of that weekend is Max tilting off the face of the earth. He's on that radio going, no, mate, don't give me that shit. You're the ones who gave me this shit program and blah, blah, blah. He is raging. And then, like, 10 laps after that, he boils it straight into Lewis Hamilton and goes, it's his fault. Bro, GP's on the radio going, you're childish, Max. Come on now. That race was so juicy. Like, if you're just here for the drama and the radio, man, just Hungary just
Oh,
on repeat, because that was wild scenes, bro. I have never heard radio messages like that. That's like a for sure highlight in the, little McLaren storyline. Bro, that Piastri win in Hungary, so funny. The radio messages, unreal.
Drive to Survive. I haven't even thought about it for most of the season, but Drive to Survive is gonna have some juicy footage for some of these episodes.
For sure, bro. Max is like, no, mate, don't give me that shit. He was pissed.
Oh
Man,
yeah.
that's so good. There's like, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff you could go into, man. It's the McLaren v Red Bull was like so good.
Oh
So
yeah.
good this year.
It really was, and of course McLaren getting the constructors championship, their first time since I forget if it was 92 or 98. It was somewhere back in the 90s that they won the constructors championship last. Such a massive performance from them across the year, from the engineering down to the driving. They really put all the pieces together and really truly deserve that constructors championship. extremely impressive from them across the year. But yeah, I mean, just a great season. I don't. There's so many moments I could just keep going all night, but phenomenal season, and it makes me excited for next year, and it was fun going back through all these moments.
Yeah, big time agree. I had a lot of fun in 2024, that's for sure. Big surprise, just thinking of like final notes, things we didn't really talk about. Biggest surprise was probably Aston Martin. Biggest difference between the lead driver and the second driver. I don't think. What?
Red Bull.
Uh, Yeah, fair. Okay. Well, ones that we like wouldn't have talked about often.
Yeah.
The difference between Alonso and Stroll is like massive, and
Yeah.
they just like fell off a cliff. Alonso had a bunch of like really promising performances early, but I think they were just losing out in the development race. So they ended up kind of falling off like the talking points list, these kind of things.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think we hit a lot of the really big moments. Max clinching the drivers' championship early. Constructors championship going all the way to the end, like that's super exciting. Giving a reason to kind of tune in every weekend, where eventually it doesn't become just like, well, these last three races or whatever don't really matter for whatever you're rooting for. So I think that's really interesting. So yeah, just a kind of a banger of a year. I don't know that there's anything more I could say that illustrates it or gives any more detail to the year. I think we covered off like a bunch of the highlights, the things that we cared about most. Obviously, we're coming at it from kind of a Red Bull lens, kind of a McLaren lens, but overall, those were like the top two competing teams. If we had a Ferrari fan in here, I'm sure we could have got some Leclerc praise in there a little bit more. But yeah, I just think no matter which way you slice it, there was just a lot of good to get out of the meal.
Yeah, absolutely. So a nice closing to the 2024 Formula One season. Excited for next year. Maybe Adrian Newey will be able to help Aston Martin with their development trajectory as the season goes on. But that will bring us into our cool down lap for this week. Justin, why don't you lead us off with your Rose, Thorn, and Seed?
Hell yeah, dude. So I'm gonna give you summaries of Rose, Thorn, and Seed. I went back, took a gander at some of the other seeds that I've had, maybe what are the themes around them. So let me hit you with an end of the year Rose, Thorn, and Seed, if you will. So looking back over the course of 2024, one of the biggest Rose things that I could talk about would be my enjoyment of esports and the change in thinking that I've had around esports. For some reason, I wouldn't just fully enjoy them. I thought maybe because not like all of my friends are into it, or like maybe I'm not into the like cool things or whatever, but like, oh, like esports is like my little guilty pleasure. Instead of feeling like it that way, I was like, you know what, forget that. I really enjoy this. And so 2024, I kind of jumped in with like both feet first and really became the esports fan that I want to be, where I'm not worrying about what others may think. I was just enjoying it for me, and that felt like really good. So over the course of the year, I think just really diving into esports just in general, I think was really awesome. And in that regard, I think I've had one of the best years in relation to esports that I've ever had. I think I was the most engaged, all these things. So that's my rose.
Nice.
My thorn overall, if I would look back at the year and think like, what's going wrong? What am I doing wrong? What am I like worried about? My biggest thing, I just hurry up to wait really quickly. That's like the thing that I'm best at. So I really need to just like to I guess meditate on that a little bit. I need to release a little bit of urgency that I associate with things. And maybe not totally, I don't have to be full flip flops on the beach about things, but maybe just release a little bit of urgency will give grace to those around me, and maybe just give a little bit of grace to myself where I'm not just like stressing myself out all the time about things that I can't necessarily like control, maybe like right now or whatever it is. So learning that one of my biggest thorns is I hurry up to weight really quickly all the time, and maybe I just need to just hang out on a lamppost for a minute, and that'll be fine too. My seed here for the year that I've kind of looked back and thought of is the one thing that I talked a lot about with you is like business and massage and like things that aren't really going that well. But through that, I've taken a bunch of steps and have put into practice a whole bunch of new things and have really changed my focus in a way that at the end of 2024 here, I know for a fact that I'm a better therapist than I was when I started. I took a whole lot of lumps earlier in the year, that's for sure. But I think I'm coming out on the other side like way better for it, and actually understanding myself as a practitioner like even better. So some of those seeds that I planted early in the year have actually like looking back and checking in on them, they've actually like grown into like useful vegetables that I can use. So I think that's really exciting to like look back and see what I wrote, because I keep all my notes from the show, to look back and see what I wrote and kind of consolidate it into like, okay, well, what can I learn from this? And I think that's what I've learned is I've become a better therapist than I was earlier, and that was only through like focus and intention on it.
And I think that also like just can be that ego boost, like a pot, like not a negative ego, but just a positive, like, oh, like look where I was, look what I did to improve it, and here's where I am now, and I feel like I'm in a better spot. That is the kind of growth that I think you want to see, but without actually looking back and reflecting on those things and thinking through, okay, this was what was bothering me, difficult XYZ back then, and now in relation to that same thing, like, where am I at? Oh, like, that's not even something that crosses my mind anymore, because it's just something that you've created a system for, something that you've improved, so it's not a weak point, something that you've developed. And so that's definitely a nice way to reflect on the year.
Yeah, so that's my rose thorn and seed here for this final episode of 2024. What do you got for us?
So, to be honest, I hadn't thought it through super well, so you leading off helped me out there. But kind of looking at the year with the podcast and everything, my rose is that I'm super excited that we just did this new podcast, and we put this together for a year long. I think we've continued to grow with the podcast, and kind of how our style and our structure and everything like that have worked across the year. Part of that going to kind of my thorn when I was looking back at some of my notes and the early episodes and things like that, with trying to come up with some of the structure and everything, having segments like the good, the bad, and the Latifi. When I'm like reading that back, I was like, oh man, that definitely needed to be workshopped a bit more, and it was, and we've now kind of getting into going right into my seed and blending these all together. But I feel like we've made a ton of improvements across this year. I feel like there are very specific kind of things that I know I would like to put time towards during the time in between Formula One seasons and everything, on improvements for the show, things that we can do for structure for the video portions of this, and maybe trying to continue to grow this podcast like we would like to be in the Formula One just universe with people who are fans and friends and family and everything alike, as we're putting this content together and everything. So looking forward to next year, kind of. I'm excited that I have some specific things in mind that I want to get done so that we can just have a better quality that we can put out and feel like we're growing with the podcast as well, which I feel like we have from our previous podcast together all the way through now. I feel like we're constantly stepping forward, and that's cool.
I big time agree. That's beautiful. I love hearing that type of reflection because I feel very similar to you, where the episodes that we've done, like the last 4 episodes that we've done, feel like they are different in a more honed way than even when we just started at the beginning of the year. And I would have even told you at the beginning of the year, when we got done that first episode, I was like, dude, we nailed this. That felt so good. How much better was this? Blah, blah, blah. And even now we're like, oh, no. That's effectively a prototype. We're moving on. We're improving. We're changing. We're dialing it all in. So yeah, I just love that type of thinking about it and reflection. Because yeah, I feel very similar. Like, I'm so proud of this year's show, like, so much. I feel like we have genuinely put together an entertaining, an educational show, where we started out at the beginning of the year, and this is a way we can tie it all together. We started out at the beginning of the year thinking like, okay, what's our value proposition for the show? Like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to bring our enjoyment. We're trying to bring like a lighthearted take. We're not trying to dive too deep, and we're trying to maybe educate a little bit. So like lighthearted, entertaining, but like taking what we learn, incorporating that into the show, and giving it to anybody who wants to listen. And by golly, I think we nailed that. If that was like our long-term goal for the year, I would say we hit it. Maybe we would have liked to get a couple more subscribers, maybe a few more impressions over the year. But overall, if we just start at that small goal of like, did we do what we set out to do originally, is make this type of show, I say we hit it.
Yeah, and I think it, just because we didn't hit all of our goals, that leaves us room for improvement and to grow. And I think we definitely have made something that we can both be proud of, and I'm looking forward to that continuing this coming year in 2025 and all that brings for us.
Yeah, I big time agree. So to anybody still here, to anybody listening, I just want to say thank you so much for a wonderful 2024 Formula One season. Thank you so much for being there to share it with us. We hope you have a wonderful end of the year, and we look forward to seeing you back at the start of the 2025 Formula One season coming up next year. Very excited for us. Find us at the Tyred Boys podcast. I've been your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Happy New Year, happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2025.
Peace out, everyone.